You wanted to start with a summary of the three big ideas that you have been talking about in the last couple of live streams and bring them all together just to remind us at the top of the hour. Verificationism, autoimmunity, and group psychosis.
Right. So these are three concepts that I believe are at least very useful, if not necessary, in cobbling together a mechanism for sense-making in this moment where our sense-making is becoming increasingly deranged. And in fact, the model in part explains why sense-making is becoming so deranged. So I'm actually going to start with autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is a process by which the body, which is supposed to recognize an absolute distinction between molecules that you yourself make and molecules that you yourself do not make, and therefore, if they are organic molecules, the body assumes are hostile, and it attacks them with the immune system. So that system develops when you're very young. Your system recognizes every molecule that you yourself are producing, and it eliminates the cells in your immune system that react to it, leaving only cells that react to other things. So this is an analogy for the situation that we find ourselves in, where we see many in our midst attacking the very structures on which our system depends. And they are attacking them with various rationalizations, claiming that these structures are so broken that they could not possibly be rescued. But the result is, just like a body that is rejecting its own tissue, that we are putting ourselves in mortal jeopardy as a result of this misunderstanding. I would also, just as an aside, point out that many of the food sensitivities that some of us have, I have a very severe sensitivity to wheat, that these things are like autoimmunity, except instead of reacting to your own tissues, you're reacting to foods that you yourself consume. So something has caused me, for example, to become reactive to wheat molecules. When I eat them, my immune system reacts and I get sick as a result not of the wheat, but as a result of my reaction to it. So autoimmunity is a key concept. The second key concept for sense-making in this moment is verificationism. So verificationism is a process whereby instead of trying to find reasons to disbelieve some hypothesis, you look for reasons to believe it. And the problem with verificationism is that one can often find some evidence for a wrong idea. And therefore, if you are looking for evidence that confirms a hypothesis, you will very often validate it even though it is false. Whereas if you try to falsify a hypothesis and you fail, that means there isn't strong evidence against it, and the hypothesis probably has a good degree of truth in it. So the claim is that most of what people are doing as they are trying to make sense of the world at the moment involves verificationism, that they have a perspective and they are looking for things that validate it, and they are finding a tremendous amount of support for wrong ideas on the basis that they are looking only for those things that support them rather than things that negate them, which results in what we are arguing is group psychosis. That psychosis is essentially the result of incompatible programs running simultaneously, that when one cannot reconcile two things or cannot find a mechanism to compartmentalize them and keep them apart, what happens is the programs keep tripping over each other. And so one ends up responding to a view of reality that is false and disruptive of the ability to function properly. So much of what we see is the result, for example, of two perspectives, both of which are wrong, being simultaneously deployed to different populations who find each other increasingly ununderstandable. These incompatibilities are resulting in us, at some level, literally becoming crazy, some of us as individuals, but all of us as part of this group that cannot figure out even in what language to approach each other to discuss what we face and what our overwhelmingly common interests clearly are. We can't figure out how to protect them because the incompatibilities between these worldviews are too great. The gap is too big for us to look past it.
Yeah. In the language of sense-making, we literally do not find any sense in those who are on the other side.
We do not find any sense, and increasingly we regard them as some anomalous phenomenon, right? In fact, I would argue that one of the outgrowths of a psychotic collective sense-making is the verificationist belief that, in fact, you've got it right and the other side is simply insane. And if one can, for a moment, just step out of your own sense-making bubble and realize that the likelihood of that is actually quite small, right? It's certainly possible for a small number of people to be simply insane. But the idea that half the population has simply lost its mind while you have retained a perfect grasp of what's going on is indeed quite unlikely. So the trick, the thing, which actually, I swear, if you'll try it, you'll find it rewarding and maybe even reassuring. But the trick is to figure out who you can talk to in that group of people who you probably regard as batshit crazy, who might be able to convey to you where to stand in order to see through their eyes. Now, many on your own side will tell you, don't you dare, right? To the extent that you even humor them as if they are making some kind of point, you are putting the thing that we must do right away in jeopardy. And you must ignore that. If your purpose is to figure out what's going on rather than just to simply participate on a team, no matter how dangerous its viewpoint has become, then it is necessary that you figure out how to understand what those on the other side are seeing. All right, so that's the model. And indeed, I think you will see in many of the things that we discussed today that these ways, these concepts that help organize our thinking around the way events are unfolding in the world, many of them are manifest in these other unrelated topics or seemingly unrelated topics.
Well, and to your final point there, I would say that we hear a lot from people who say they are right of center, who say they enjoy hearing what we have to say because we are trying to make sense rather than simply indoctrinate. And there are a number of ways that little soundbite can sound, but that people are coming to us despite the fact that we probably have never voted the same way they have or would disagree on a lot of the methods by which we are trying to obtain a just world, but that so long as we do share underlying values, which the vast majority of us do, that people are heartened. Conservatives, good faith conservatives, are heartened to hear us as good faith liberals doing this kind of analysis. And one of the things that is so disheartening, and I think we may, I guess we could start here, but I want to talk just briefly at some point today about what's going on in Louisville and the response to it. I mean, maybe that is the right way. I thought we would finish there, but should we maybe start there?
Well, I want to follow on two things that you said, and then maybe we can come back to that. One is, somewhere in, I think it must have been at the end of last week, I happened to catch a Tucker Carlson monologue in which he specifically alerted his audience. He called out honorable liberals who are horrified by what's going on the nominal left at the moment. Mm-hmm. And his exact phrase was something like, honorable liberals are horrified too. They exist, Mm-hmm. Right. And he was actually calling out the very fact that it's easy to misunderstand that such a person on the other side might exist. And he is, I felt a little bit that he was winking at us and some of our IDW friends who have managed to make higher quality sense in these confusing moments. But the other thing we get is the flip side, which you called out in an early live stream, which was the inverse of Trump derangement syndrome.
Ah, yes.
And so
the mirror image of Trump derangement
image of Trump derangement syndrome, which we often hear too. When we critique Trump, when we say things like, really, he must be removed from office, right? We must vote him out. I don't feel like I'm saying anything extraordinary in the context of a democracy. Right, the idea that a sitting president has demonstrated that they must be eliminated in the next round of elections is par for the course, and yet we are frequently accused of being just simply blinded by our hatred for Trump. And I must say, I don't actually feel hatred. I feel urgency. Right, I feel
but it's that critique is exactly as dumb as the response to Trump, that he cannot do anything right, and therefore anything that comes out of his mouth must be wrong. That is exactly as dumb, frankly, and exactly as dangerous a response. Every person in any position must be critiquable, and ascribing to someone who critiques someone else a derangement syndrome as a way to get rid of their critique is it's schoolyard tactics. It's the antics of a third grader, really.
Well, so I want to, the key question is, can you escape it? Whatever it is that drives you to these things. Mm-hmm. And I feel A lot of people are just being reflexive. And that the necessity at this moment, really the only hope I see for us navigating this moment in history and coming out in any sort of decent shape whatsoever, is the ability to look past the triggers that other people have on their surface in order to be able to partner with others who are overwhelmingly in agreement about, for example, values. And so this is what annoyed me so much about the Harper's letter, was that it took great pains to stick a finger in the eye of conservatives rather than partnering with the conservatives who are clearly ready to play. And so anyway, we need to stop being so triggered. People who believe something that is incompatible with your worldview may believe many things that are compatible, and finding the way to bridge those gaps is essential. It is where hope exists.
Yeah.
And hence the resonance of the concept of unity at the moment.